Swamiji, respected Gurmukh, Gurushat, all of our sisters and brothers here together at this beautiful, beautiful celebration of Janmashtami. Janmashtami is the day in which we celebrate the anniversary of the time in which Krishna, the divine, came onto this earth in a particular form for a particular reason. But when we celebrate Janmashtami, it's not like a birthday of one of us, where we're sort of ticking off years, and there was a time when we weren't here, and then there are a certain number of years that we are here, and then eventually there'll be a time when we're not here. When we talk about Janmashtami, it's not so much a celebration of an actual physical birth or physical existence, as really an opportunity to gather together in celebration of the presence of Krishna, of the divine in our lives. And it's important right here at the very beginning to say that although the date of Krishna Janmashtami has given us a wonderful opportunity to gather together in celebration, it doesn't matter what your religion is, what your culture is, because what we're told again and again and again is the divine is one. All names, no name. All forms, no form, are the same. So whatever your background is, whatever your religion is, whatever your culture is, however you connect with the divine, that's what we're celebrating today. And when the divine graces us with their presence, it comes with a message. And when we talk about Krishna coming, he didn't come the way that the rest of us come, sort of clueless and choiceless, and we just arrived. He came for a very specific reason, and to give very specific messages and teachings. And what I want to use this beautiful time that we have is to talk about what are those messages, what are those teachings. And of course we could do that for the next month. We have just a little time tonight, so we'll just pick and choose a couple of really, really important fundamental messages of Krishna. How did Krishna give his messages? Well, the core teaching, the fundamental teaching, is in the Bhagavad Gita, which literally means the song of the divine. Because when the divine teaches, it's a song. It's music. So it's the song of the divine. And there's a wonderful story because, those of us who embark on study of the Gita, particularly those of us who have not been born and raised in an Indian tradition, find it difficult. The words are simple, and yet the concepts, the messages, the teachings feel to us sometimes very, very, very deep, very esoteric even in some ways, and complex. And there's a beautiful story of a young boy who was staying with his grandparents, and every day his grandfather would read the Gita. And this young boy goes to his grandfather one day and he says, "Grandpa, I've also started studying the Gita. The problem is I don't understand anything. I read it and I read it and I read it and I don't remember anything from one minute to the next minute. I read in the morning, by the evening I've forgotten." understand what I'm reading. What should I do? And the grandfather says, don't worry, just keep reading, keep reading. And so another few weeks go by, and the boy crawls into his grandfather's lap, and he says, Grandpa, I still can't remember anything. I don't understand anything. It's useless. I think I'm not going to read the Gita anymore because there's no point. I don't understand what it says, and I can't remember it. So the grandpa says, okay, do one thing instead. He says, you see that coal basket over there? Take that coal basket and go down to our river and bring me a basket of water. I need a basket of water. So the boy, very obedient and excited, takes the basket down to the river and fills it with water. And of course, by the time he's home, there's no water left because it's a basket, it's not a bucket, and all the water has gone through. So he says to his grandpa, Grandpa, there's no water left. Can I give you a bucket of water instead? And the grandfather says, no, I want a basket of water. Run faster, fill it more, bring me a basket full of water. So the boy, again, sweet thing, takes the basket, he goes to the river, fills it up, and as fast as his feet can carry him, he runs back home. Nonetheless, there's not a drop of water left in the basket by the time he gets home. And this goes on a few times over and over, and after failing horribly time and time again to bring even one drop of water left in the basket, the boy's nearly in tears, and he says to his grandpa, Grandpa, I'm so sorry, I'm such a failure. Even this very simple thing that you've told me to do, I can't even do that. Just a basket of water you asked for, still I can't do it. And the grandpa takes him in his lap and he says, Sweetheart, look at the basket. When you started, it's a coal basket. The basket was filthy, it was black, it was grimy and greasy. In what you see as your failed attempts to bring me a basket of water, this basket has become beautiful. It's clean, it's shining, all of the grime and gunk and dust is off the basket. So you may think your attempt to bring me a basket full of water was a failure, but look what you've done for the basket. And the same thing is true with our attempts to study the Gita. You may think that you're not understanding or retaining anything, but the attempt to do so is transforming you. In the Gita, there are, of course, innumerable lessons. Every word can be interpreted in such a way that you could do a whole day on that word. But I want to talk actually just about one of the messages that to me is one of the deepest and most personal. And it's the message of abhayam. And abhayam means fearlessness. And the Gita begins, I won't go into the details because that could take us all night, but just really quickly, the Gita begins it's a battlefield. It's a song sung on a battlefield. And Arjuna is smack in the middle of the battlefield with Krishna as his charioteer. And they've brought the chariot into the center of this battlefield. And Arjuna is surveying the situation in front of him. All of the quote-unquote enemy, but made up of his family, his villagers, his teachers on the other side, outnumbering his own team. And Arjuna freezes, and he says to Krishna, I don't want to fight. I'm terrified. I'm shaking. The hairs are standing up on my arms. I can't breathe. I'm terrified. I don't want to fight. Forget it. And so the Gita begins at this time. And the central message is one of abhayam, fearlessness. Krishna tells him, stand up and be fearless. Do your duty. Fulfill your Dharma fearlessly. And what we have to remember is the Gita was spoken messages for us. And our lives are paralyzed, like Arjun's was, by fear. Now, granted, our terror is not the type of terror that Arjun faced, of standing on a literal battlefield, outnumbered by an army. But our lives have become a battlefield, internally, externally. The enemies become inside. And so although we don't face that sheer terror that he did, we live our lives in a state of constant stress, constant tension, constant worry, constant fear. And that's become really the standard. There's a joke that I love of a man who goes into a psychiatrist, and he says to his psychiatrist, my doctor told me to come see you. And the psychiatrist says, all right, well, what's wrong? And the man says, well, I don't know, but the doctor said I should come see you. So the psychiatrist takes out his pad and starts writing, and he says to the man, well, tell me something. How's your life? And the man says, it's great. It's wonderful. It's peaceful and beautiful. And of course, I have my ups and downs, but a nice, peaceful life. And the psychiatrist says, well, how about your family? How about your career? And the man says, oh, they're also very good, very peaceful. And the psychiatrist says, well, what about your inner life? Emotions, how do you sleep at night? And the man says, well, I go to sleep fabulously. I wake up refreshed. I feel very, very, very peaceful, very joyful. The psychiatrist is scribbling furiously on his pad and his brows all clenched, and finally he looks up at the man and he says, and how long have you been like this? And I love it because stress and worry have become something that we really consider just an inherent and inevitable part of our lives. And this whole teaching is one of how to let go of that stress, of that worry. You know, here in this world, Pujya Swamiji always laughs that people talk about stress management. He says, you know, we manage that which we care about. We manage our estate, our finances. Now suddenly we have to manage our stress. It's become such an intrinsic part of who we are that we have to actually manage it. And that's what's happened. And so our way of managing it has become through the outside. Whether it's just simply shopping therapy, if I have, you know, a new pair of shoes, I'll feel better, a new handbag, I'll feel better. Or whether it's a very specific belief that something new is going to make my life easier, some new gizmo, some new gadget. I was sharing the other night that recently on an airplane, in one of the magazines on the airplane, they have a little quiz. You know, they have lots of quizzes, but one of them was this vocabulary quiz where they give you a new word, real new word, and you have to guess what it means, and there's a multiple choice options. And the word was nomophobia. And this is a true story, an actual test in one of the airline magazines. And having a background in psych, I thought, all right, well, phobia, fear, pathological fear, a fear that disrupts our lives. But of course, all of the multiple choice answers were all fear of this, fear of that. Well, this new word that actually is now in our dictionaries, you actually could go to a therapist and be diagnosed with this, is actually a fear of being without a working mobile phone. Nomophobia. Seriously, this is not a joke, it's a true story. We actually, that which we think is making our lives so much better, we actually now have developed a pathology around it. And this is where we realize that no matter what what we get. It's not taking us closer to peace. It's not taking us away from stress, away from tension, away from worry. It's not giving us what we're looking for. And that's where we come to what Puja Swamiji calls self-management instead of stress management. And that's where we realize that that which we're looking for is actually inside. And the stress comes from spending our lives searching for something that we're not finding. That's what's wrong. That's what's stealing our peace, is we're spending almost every minute of every day trying to attain something, looking for it. That happiness, that joy, that peace, but looking in the wrong place. And so naturally it's stressful. If you come in the house and absent-mindedly leave your keys in the refrigerator, or you leave them in the cupboard when you opened it to get something to drink when you walked in the house, and now later on when you want to go out, you're looking for your keys. And of course, you have no recollection that you left them in the fridge or in the cupboard. And you're looking for them where they should be, or where you assume they should be, in the hallway in the office. But you can't find them, even though you know or you think you're looking in the right place. Lack of being able to find them is stressful. And in our lives, we're looking for that peace outside. And that's not where it is. It's inside. Lord Krishna tells us in the Gita that a yogi, and by yogi he doesn't just mean someone who can do, a fabulous Shirsasana or a fabulous Trikonasana. A yogi, the united one, the wise one, the awakened one, is one to whom a handful of dirt, a lump of clay, and a brick of gold are the same. Now, what could that possibly mean? Yoga increases our ability for discrimination, whether it's spiritual discrimination between that which is right versus wrong, truth from untruth, light from darkness, or physical discrimination, our inner knee from our outer knee, our metatarsals from our metacarpals. We all know that yoga actually increases our subtlety. So for Krishna to say that a yogi is one for whom these three things are the same, he can't possibly mean that a yogi can't tell the difference between what a handful of dirt and a lump of clay and a brick of gold feel like. What he means is that a yogi is one who understands that for my life, for that which I was put here for my path, each of them is equally able and equally unable to help me get there. There's no difference between them in terms of what matters of my awakening, my path. What a yogi knows is that internal connection. And that is where the peace comes from. That's where the self-management comes from. Krishna tells him, and this is the last part that I'll share this evening for now, is Krishna tells him, drop the drama, drop the stories. It's a path really from drama to Dharma. Krishna says to him, this drama is what's creating the problem for you. What you think your relation is, what you think the history is, who you think they are, who you think you are, what you think this whole war is about. This is the cause of your stress. And in our lives, our stories what trap us and bind us. We identify so completely, like Arjun did, with what's happened to us, how it all went awry, where we were betrayed, where we were cheated, where we were lied to, where we were outnumbered, how long we had to go through that. Whether we think we're angry, whether we think we're now ready to just be done, who cares? Surrender to the divine plan. Whatever we think the story is, and whatever we think our role in the story is, that drama, that story, is what keeps us stuck. When we just did this beautiful fire ceremony, and we placed the offerings, it's an offering of that drama, of those stories, where we're stuck. And what Krishna tells him is, this is not about the drama. They're not who you think you are. You're not who you think you are. And through that message to Arjun, he's telling us, you are not who you think you are. You're not where this body's been, what's happened to it, what it's learned, what it hasn't learned, what it's earned, what it hasn't earned, what's happened to it, what should have happened to it that didn't happen to it. This whole plot, in Arjun's case, the war, in our case, our current situation, is given to us to understand the nature of the divine and our own nature, so that we can live our Dharma. Arjun, of course, had it easy. He actually had Krishna in form, standing over him, speaking to him. We're not quite so lucky in that way. But what Krishna tells us over and over again is, I'm there. I'm there with you. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it. Quiet enough to hear that voice of your Dharma, of your truth inside. And be prepared to let go of the drama. When most of us close our eyes, we sit to meditate and nothing but drama goes on in our own minds. He said this, she said this, he didn't say that, she didn't say this, she should have said this, he's going to say that, I didn't say this. From yesterday, from 5 years ago, from 50 years ago, from 5 years from now. And so we can't hear that voice. And so on this day, at this beautiful time, let's take this really auspicious opportunity to forge a path in our own lives from the drama into the Dharma. Because that voice is there. Everything on earth has it. Everything on earth knows what its Dharma is. You never see an apple seed blossom into sort of half an apple tree and half a peach tree because it couldn't decide. The apple seed becomes an apple tree. The peach seed becomes a peach tree. The rose bud unfolds as a rose. The jasmine bud unfolds as a jasmine. The caterpillar climbs the tree and weaves its cocoon and comes out as a butterfly. But if it spends its entire life bemoaning the fact that it's not the millipede and its brain is just going on and on and on about how many extra feet the millipede got and how it got shortchanged, and it always gets shortchanged, and it's only got 12 legs and the millipede's got 1,000. It's going to miss that call that says climb the tree, weave the cocoon. And then it's going to say, but how do I know what my Dharma is? Well, your Dharma is shouting itself at you. But you're too busy staring at the millipede, worrying about the millipede, to hear it. So let us here in this place, after having this sacred ceremony on this day, really allow ourselves to leave behind that drama, which is preventing us from really, really hearing that voice of the divine. Because when Krishna comes, of course, by any name, any form, he comes to speak to us. So let us leave from here quiet and still enough to be able to hear it. Thank you. We have a few minutes for one or two questions, and then after that there will be a wonderful free vegetarian feast, langar, and people can also come up and take blessings from Puja Swamiji. But if there are one or two questions, we have just a few minutes for that. So just raise your hand if anyone has a question about anything. Yes. We don't have a mic back there, so just speak loudly.
How the karma and the God's grace work together?
How does karma and God's grace work together? In Indian tradition, we talk so much about karma and about us getting our karmic dues and good karma and bad karma. And then, of course, as you say, we have grace. They work beautifully together. Karma gives us, scientifically, that which is the reaction to whatever we've done. So for example, we know in science you have a stimulus and a response. If I plant an apple seed, I'm going to get an apple tree. No amount of singing peach mantras and doing peach songs and peach asanas and peach prayers is going to turn that apple seed into a peach tree. But then what happens in our lives? We end up with our apple tree, convinced that what we really needed are peaches. Looking around, seeing peaches, wishing for peaches, miserable that we don't have peaches, convinced that we're allergic to apples, that because of this apple tree, everything has gone wrong in our life. What God's grace does is it comes in and actually does two things. First of all, it shows us where to find peach seeds. Because it's not about praying to this apple tree that somehow I'm going to open my eyes from meditation and my meditation is going to be so strong that my apple tree will become a peach tree. That's not what it's about. It's not a magic wand. What God's grace is, we always laugh that people sort of think of God or the guru or prayers or mantras like a vending machine. You walk up to a vending machine and you put in your dollar bill and you push the button for chocolate, and what comes out? A chocolate bar. And if it doesn't come out, we assume correctly the vending machine's broken. In life, we walk up to it metaphorically, we put in our metaphoric dollar bill, we do our prayers, we do our mantras, we do our meditation, we push the button for chocolate, and out comes a bag of carrots instead. And so we're convinced, I've got, the wrong mantra, the wrong practice, the wrong guru, the wrong machine is broken. I need a new mantra, a new guru, a new teaching, a new CD, a new path. Or the stars are against me, God hates me, everything's wrong. Without realizing, maybe I'm 500 pounds and diabetic. Maybe my teeth are rotten. Maybe, my health is this far from killing me. And what the universe has given me is exactly what I need. So what God's grace does, going back to my apple and peach tree example, what God's grace does is shows us where to find a peach seed. It's not that magic wand that turns the apple tree into the peach tree. It's not a vending machine that I'm going to say the right month and push the button and my chocolate bar is going to come out, regardless of the state of my teeth, the state of my blood sugar, the state of my weight. But it shows us how in the future, if peaches are really what I'm supposed to have, how to plant that seed, and then how to care for that seed. But God's grace does something else. Teaches us how to make apple pie. And it helps us understand the joy of apples. And if it turns out we really are allergic to them, well, then it teaches us how to make apple pie for others. Or apple preserves for others, or it teaches us how to bag up those apples and go to the streets where the homeless people live and to distribute the apples. So that's where they come in. It's not that if I just pray, I'm not going to get the karma from my actions. You know, people come, we live on the banks of Ganga, and people come and they have a bath in Ganga, and what our tradition tells us is if you have a bath in Ganga, you're purified, your sins are purified. Whatever you've done, you're purified. Well, that only holds true if the bath in Ganga transforms how you think and how you act. It's not a get out of jail free card where it's, well, I'm just going to keep cheating people and keep lying and keep stealing and keep doing all of these wrong things, and then I'll just go and have my weekly or monthly or annual bath in Ganga. That's not how God's grace works. It works by changing who we are, who the doer is. So that next week we have peach trees. So that what our karma brings us next week and next year is different. You know, where we are right now is the sum total of what we've done in the past. But where we are tomorrow is what we've done today. So God's grace shows us, how do I live my life today? So that tomorrow and next week and next month and next year, my karma blossoms in the way that I want it to. Yeah.
Why human beings get the psychological problems, and what is the way to heal the conscience?
Why do human beings get psychological problems, and what's the way to treat them well? Really, really quickly, because this is actually a really, really in-depth question. And it's a subject that I love, so it's something that, we could do a whole other evening on. But really, really quickly, there's two things that go on, and of course they interconnect. One of them is what Puja Swamiji calls just our expectations. That which creates the vast majority of what we would put under the umbrella of psychological problems. My depression, my anxiety, my addictions are due to some expectation that I had that hasn't been fulfilled. And now what's important is it doesn't mean that the expectation was wrong. We come onto earth expecting correctly, rightly, that our parents should treat us well, that we shouldn't be harmed, that the universe should punish people who are bad actions, reward people who are good actions, that effort should end in reward. We have all of these expectations, and expectation doesn't mean that you're crazy. The problem happens when those expectations aren't fulfilled. And how we are or are not able to let go the story. We were talking about stories. Does my entire identity get wrapped up in that which did happen or didn't happen or should have happened or shouldn't have happened. And that's what leads us to the psychological problems. We start to identify with them. I am a victim of this, a victim of that, the child of this, the child of that, the one who gets the short end of the stick, the one who was cheated, the one who was betrayed, or the opposite. We wrap our identities up with that. So when we treat psychological issues, one of the main issues is, well, who would you be without your depression or your anxiety or your addiction or your whatever you have? Who would you be without it? It's become such a part of my identity that I hold on to it regardless of how painful and damaging and enslaving it is, because it's who I am, and I don't know who I would be without it. And so that's where the practice of meditation and spirituality comes in, is suddenly it shows us, oh wait, as Puja Swamiji said, you are not your action that got you in this jail. Similarly, you are not other people's actions to you. And so the minute we start to understand who we are, that identification melts. And when the identification melts, then it becomes much easier to release ourselves from those shackles. Okay, two more quick ones, and then before we have prasad, we also have a very quick little ceremony.
So this is from the little person in the room, and she would like to know what God is made of. What God is.
Can your little person stand up? What are you made of? Come here. Come here. Come. Then everybody can hear you and I don't have to repeat it. Okay. So what are you made of?
I'm made of skin and bones.
Well, that's what your body's made of. But you know what? Your skin keeps changing. Do you know that every few days, all of these pieces on your skin keeps changing? But you are still there. Your bones keep growing and changing. What if you break a bone? You're still here, right? Okay, so what are you made of?
I don't really technically know.
None of us. You know, we laugh. But she's actually, this is the beauty of children. They're honest in a way that the rest of us aren't. If most of us tried to answer that question, we'd probably say something that we've read or heard that we think is the right answer. Something very metaphysical and divine, but not necessarily something with which we actually had an experiential awareness. And she's been really beautifully honest. I don't technically know. Well, until we've experienced it, none of us can technically know. We can't know something just because someone's told it to us or we've read it. What God is made of is what you are made of. And when you really know what you're made of, then you're going to know what God is made of. What is the ocean made of? Water, right. Now, water, if we look at it under a microscope, what we know is it's H2O. And if we look at the water in flowing in the river Ganga, flowing in the Mississippi, flowing down the gutter. It's all H2O. Under a microscope, it's all the same water. And gravity is pulling it all back to the ocean because its source is the ocean. Ultimately, whether we call it the divine sacred Ganga Yamuna, whether we call it the Mississippi or whether we call it the gutter, ultimately it's all ocean. It started in the ocean. The process of evaporation brought it up into the clouds. The clouds carried it somewhere, dumped it somewhere. It's now on its way back to the ocean. But all of those drops of water are ultimately ocean. So if we want to know what the ocean's made of, the easiest way to understand it is to look at what the drops are made of. And what God is made of is you. And what you're made of is God. And that same infinity. How old are you? Okay. Well, you probably haven't learned this in math yet, but in a few years they're going to teach you a wonderful equation, or a wonderful truth, fact. And the truth is that when we take infinity and we divide it or subtract from it, we're left with infinity. 100 minus 10 becomes 90. But infinity minus 10 is still infinity. 100 divided by 2 is 50, but infinity divided by 2 is still infinity. So no matter what we divide it by, it's still infinity. And so you were created by God, but not just by God. You're not just like a cup that some potter made on his wheel and now he's done with it and cup has gone to the shop and potter has gone home. You've been made of God. So what you are is what God is. Does that make sense? Wonderful. And what does that mean about how you live your life?
What do you actually mean by that?
What I actually mean is, if we think we're just skin and bones, then we live just like skin and bones. But when we know that we're actually God, how would we live? How would we live differently?
Let me think about that for a second.
You think about that. In the meantime, let me just take the last question. You think about it. I'm coming back to you. We're going to end with you. Last question.
Is it fear or bravery that makes us create, risk, or self-destruct?
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question? I missed a few words in it. Is it fear or?
Or bravery that makes us fear, risk, create, or self-destruct?
Is it fear or bravery that makes us risk, create, or self-destruct?
And how does karma have anything to do with it?
Of course, when I say one last quick question. Bravery. Here's something beautiful. I'm trying to think of a very quick way to give the respect and sincerity that your question deserves without going on all night about it. We associate bravery and courage to be relatively synonymous. But what's very interesting is that bravery, the root of bravery actually comes from covering ourselves and shielding ourselves, separating ourselves from the world. Whereas the root of courage actually comes from the word cœur, which in French we know means heart. It's actually the same root of heart. And the word courage literally means to have an open heart. So what I would say to you is it's definitely not bravery. Bravery separates us from the world. In the the times in our life in which we feel like we need to be brave in order to take a risk, what we should actually try to be is courageous instead. Because it gives us that same strength. But instead of a strength of separation, it gives us a strength of openness. And when we have an open heart, when we've actually opened ourselves to the oneness in the world, then whatever we do is going to be done out of that experience of oneness. So we're not going to self-destruct. We're always going to create. That which leads us to self-destruction is fear, certainly not bravery. It's fear, it's confusion, ego, attachment, illusion. We self-destruct because we don't realize what the self is or who the self is. If we knew what the self was, we would never distract.
What about the risk and the creativity?
Creativity comes from being in contact and in touch with the flow of the universe, which also, of course, comes from being open. Nature is creative. Pujya Swamiji, he travels so much, and he always marvels at how, wherever you go, 7 billion people on earth today, God knows how many have come in the past, not one of them looks like any other. How amazing creation is. Go into a garden. Every flower is different. Every tree is different. Look at a sunset. Anything in nature is creative. When we are in contact with the flow of the universe, when we're not isolating ourselves through bravery, through putting up shields and borders and boundaries and isolating ourselves in a box, then and only then can creativity flow. It has to have a fearlessness to it, though, because we don't let anything flow through us if we're afraid. We have to have faith in the universe that's going to flow through us. Does that make sense in a very quick nutshell?
Yes, and what about the risk?
Let's do one thing. Let's talk afterwards. I want to just quickly end with her. We'll be here for a while afterwards. I want to give you your time, but also move into the celebration and the dinner part. Okay. Have you come up with an answer?
But what were you talking about?
How will you live your life differently? Or how will you live your life knowing that you are made of God? How will you treat other people?
Nicely. And respectfully.
Wonderfully. Nicely and respectfully. It reminds me with what we'll conclude with, which is a story that is attributed to a very famous philosopher who had spent much of his life studying the world's religions and writing plays, writing books. And at the end of his life, on his deathbed, someone said to him, so, you've spent your whole life studying the world's religions and becoming so famous as a writer and a philosopher. What's really the sum total of all of the world's religious paths? Is there some way to sum up all of the world's religions that you've learned? And he was quiet for a moment, and then he opened his eyes and he said, just be kind. So yes, nicely